let's meet our amazing panelists. I'd like to start first with Alexi Grimm. Alexi, hello, how are you?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be a part of this event.
Thank you. Well, we're just glad that you could make the time to be with us, so we appreciate that. Let me tell you a little about Alexi. Alexi is the head of digitalization at the Bank of Finland, so a very warm welcome to you. All the way over in Poland, we have Radek Letinsky. A very good day to you, Radek.
Hello.
Hi. Radek is the head of retail risk management at mBank. So again, thank you so much for joining us. A little bit closer to home. Travers Clark Walker. Welcome, Travers.
Hi, Julia.
Hi. Travers is the Chief Commercial Officer at Thought Machine. So thank you again for making the time to be with us. And last but not least, we have Martin Fleming. Hello, Martin.
Hi, Julia.
Hi. Martin is the Mortgage Transformation Director at Lloyds Banking Group. We've got plenty to cover, and I'm sure that you've got your own questions and comments that you'd like to put to the panel. You know what to do, but just a reminder, if you don't, go to that Q&A feed, and if there's something that you want to respond to, then feel free to do that as long as it's not rude. We do not take rude comments here, but we would love to get your questions as well, and hopefully we'll be able to accommodate them in the time available. But let's start the discussion by talking about what it means to be agile in today's changed world, and more importantly, how banks can make the leap from legacy to agile and flexible systems. So it's a big subject. Martin, I want to start first with you, and then I'd like to get the response of the other panelists to this question. But look, the concept of agile working has evolved rapidly over the past 3 months or so, obviously, when the lockdown itself began. So from your perspective, what have the key changes been?
I think I go back to what your last speaker said a bit, because we're on that agile journey as well, probably a little bit behind where ING is. But it was interesting to see the impact of the lockdown. So I think it was much less because we'd started that agile journey. Some teams were very little impact. Some teams actually moved faster in the lockdown because they were the right part of the cycle. But it also showed that some of our teams that had lots of external dependencies working on large sort of enterprise-wide programs struggled a bit more to maintain velocity. And so I suppose it brought to the fore the power of agile working and how smaller teams can continue to move quickly when they have that sort of disruption.
Okay, and so that's Martin's experience. Alexi, what about you? What are the changes that you've seen as a result of the lockdown, etc., and the move towards greater agility?
Yeah, so I think people stopped going to branches, and there was a longer-term development already going on in the banking sector of serving customers using different digital channels. And I think to me, it's all about the end-to-end process. And I think in the previous presentation we heard about that, and I agree with those points. Is that the customers are now interacting directly with the systems of the bank. They're not interacting through necessarily a human customer service representative, but actually they need to interact with the systems directly, and the systems weren't really originally designed for that. So some of the banks that have been able to transform over the years to prepare for these kinds of this kind of situation are in a good position now, and the others are maybe now struggling with putting their sort of remote customer service processes in place.
Is that your experience as well, Travers? Because what Alexi seems to be saying here is that it's almost like a two-tier systems emerged between those who perhaps had the mechanics in place. And so, yes, they were able to respond to the crisis, but those who perhaps got left behind. And if they're not quite starting from scratch, they're certainly having to find a new starting point as such for themselves.
I do like your language of a two-tier system in there. And I think what the last 3 months really has proved to us is that banks can act quickly from a decision-making, a cultural, a leadership perspective, but they are materially hamstrung by the underlying technology to serve up those decisions. I was struck actually by one of the speakers earlier, Andrew from RBS, who said culturally the bank had moved incredibly quickly. The leadership were able to determine exactly what the bank should do. But it was held back by the underlying technology, and the customers of banks are now seeking, complex differences in their products, whether or not that's the mortgage holidays or credit card payment deferrals and so on. And the banks have stepped up and been able to serve those requirements, but they've done them in the traditional way. They've relied upon their branch staff or their telephony staff or their back office staff. They've been unable to rely upon the technology to be able to step in and solve some of the problems. So I think we are now at the forefront of a deep requirement for deep technological renewal through the stacks, not just the digital front end relationships, if you like.
Okay, and Radek, what's your take on this about the agility issue effectively and the key changes that have evolved? I mean, it does appear to be sort of hinging around that relationship between the customer and the bank and what the customers themselves are now expecting.
Well, the model has changed, of course. The model of the cooperations with the client, to some extent, it has changed. Yeah, but we are keeping to be agile because we started to be agile before, of course, 3 or 4 years ago. And now I would say from that perspective, nothing has changed. The cooperation is more difficult. Yeah. So keeping the relations with other employees is much more difficult. Yeah. So this is a new challenge for us. Yeah. But we have to be agile even more now. Yeah.
And it's interesting as well, Martin, because when we were listening to Travers a few moments ago, he talked about underlying technology, which I interpret as legacy systems. But is it just legacy systems or perhaps also legacy ways of thinking? And how can we address this, or how can banks more specifically address it?
Yeah, I think, yes, the technology is important, but the biggest single challenge is that mindset change for the organization to become agile, to be less hierarchical, to strip away the layers that exist usually between product owners and customers and between product owners and engineers, because many of these banks have built up multiple layers and highly complex organizations to keep those people in separate houses, as your earlier speaker was saying. So if you can make those changes, you can gain a lot of velocity even without changing your technology. If you change your technology as well, then there's a huge opportunity.
And let's stay with this issue about legacy systems, Alexei, because they seem to have actually held banks back in the past, and perhaps to a certain extent still do today, and that could be at the expense of the customer experience. But again, from your perspective, where is that impact most serious?
I think it helps to look historically how we got to where we are today. So the large banks we see today didn't become large by growing organically, but instead they are the outcome of a series of mergers and acquisitions. And there was a paradigm in banking at one point of universal banks basically doing a bit of everything, a bit of everything for everyone. So a lot of banking groups are the result of these mergers and acquisitions. And what happens in a merger is that there's an integration process, and sometimes those integration processes weren't fully completed. So you might have changed the logo at the branch door, but you didn't really integrate all the systems in the background. So as a result, a lot of the banks are now stuck with hundreds of different legacy systems which were never really properly integrated. And that's an issue that's causing problems today. So now the requirements of the customers are changing, and yes, there's the organizational part, there's the customer experience part, but also the systems aren't able to respond to the requirements of the customers, which are now 24/7 real-time processing, data analytics, APIs, and so on. And at the same time, banks have profitability issues due to several factors like low interest rates, increasing competition, tightening regulation. So it's really difficult to justify a huge investment into IT. The ROI is really difficult to justify. But some banks have been able to do it, and I think in the long run that transformation is just kind of inevitable and has to be done.
Yeah, and I guess it becomes a game of survival of the fittest, really, that you can see what the challenges are, and the choice is sink or swim, jump on it, get across it and deal with it. Otherwise, that's it, you're just thrown to the wall. But look, let's broaden things out, because in actual fact, this next question, Travers, it relates to a very large extent on the poll, which we will be returning to because we have had quite a good response to that. But look, we often hear about this new technology, about automation, cloud and machine learning, driving operational agility, all that sort of thing. But look, what do you regard as the most important of the technologies for banks to master, and why? Is there any one of these new deals that they should be focusing on to actually drive themselves forward and connect with their customers in the future?
Oh, certainly, without doubt, from my perspective at least, cloud technologies. So becoming adept at cloud native technologies, understanding them, schooling up the organization internally, and identifying what the benefits to their end customers can be from this generation of technology. In many respects, banks have missed the moment a few years back. We've seen other organizations, the likes of Netflix, completely redesign their organization around cloud native technologies. And the banks are at the point where they now need to address the opportunity and all the rest of the things that come with it. So, there is a plethora of brilliant new technologies, and some of the others are referenced in the poll here, AI, machine learning, automation, and so on. But to build on Alexi's point, underneath the bank at the moment, there are hundreds of systems that have not been fully integrated with one another. That is the legacy of the past. And in order to genuinely make use of the next generation of technology, that needs to be swept away. And by far and away, the main premise behind that is cloud-based technologies, hyperscalability, the manner in which that they're developed, DevOps style structures. This is what really powers, back to the agility point, this is what really powers the agility of a business.
Okay, then. So you think it's cloud-based technology. Let's see what our viewers have to say about this. I want to go back to that question which we put about the poll. Which technology will be most critical to building the agile bank of tomorrow? Now, the choices were automation, RPA, artificial intelligence, cloud, or advanced analytics. So please bear with me because my eyesight isn't great. But in terms of the response to automation, RPA, 10% of you think that is going to be the most critical technologies. In terms of artificial intelligence, 33%. Cloud technology, 27%, so not too far behind, and advanced analytics, 29%. So the big loser is automation, RPA. Perhaps that's a slightly harsh word to use, the big loser. But I mean, look, I'd love to get the reaction of you guys to those figures. It's just a snapshot. It's not scientific. But look, I mean, Alexi, what's your reaction to that? Are you surprised, or does it pretty much pan out with what you've expected? You're grinning away there. You don't seem too surprised by the numbers.
Yeah, no, I'm a little bit surprised. I mean, to me, cloud really underlies a lot of these things, especially analytics and AI. They go hand in hand, but I think cloud is sort of the fundamental technology behind it. RPA, I think, is funny because it works really well in the cases that I've seen, but it's not really proper digitalization. It's kind of a interim solution in many cases. But to me, cloud is sort of more fundamental, and it really drives AI and analytics.
Okay. I mean, Radek, let's come to you now, because two things. I want to get your reaction to those numbers that I rattled off, but also as well, another bigger question is about banks and the responsibility to successfully merge the old with the new. And it's how they go about that. Is it simply a case of upskilling people and teams, or is it about technology or something else altogether? But before that, reaction to that poll so far?
Well, I'm also surprised here because I'm not the biggest fan, or I just think that the focus on the AI is a little bit overestimated. It's like the blockchain a couple of years ago. So I do believe in the cloud technologies, and I do believe in advanced analytics, of course. These are the top two for me, yeah. But of course, the lower number of the RPA is also natural from my perspective, because this is just operational, from the operational side, just solutions. Yeah, this is not nothing new, nothing special. Yeah, we just want to be better on the cost side. That's why we are doing RPAs, for example. Yeah, but going back to the question you asked. I think that there is no one answer regarding the technology or the people. Yeah, it depends on the company, on the situation of the particular company. I'm responsible for the risk management, so we have some additional difficulties in implementation of the technology, the peer-to-peer technology, because for some reason, for example, in the risk modeling, we are not able to use the black box models. Yeah, we have to on everyday basis, we have to understand and explain to regulator how the model works. So for some reasons, the machine learning or other techniques are quite difficult to implement for the risk management, credit risk management especially. But when we are talking about the technology, for me the most important thing are the people. Yeah, the people, because it depends on the implementation of the technology depends on two things. One is whether we are understanding the demands from the market, the demands of our clients, what they need in fact. And if we understand properly what they need and what they will need in the future, we can just think about the technology that we will provide the services. Yeah. So we need the people who will understand the clients and who will understand the technology and will choose the right technology for the several purposes. Yeah. And these employees should not be only well skilled, but they should have the hunger for knowledge. This is very important from my perspective. They have to learn a lot and keep learning all the time, because we don't need experts. We need people who are just learning all the time. And they should also be focused on the collaboration, because every agile model is based on the collaboration. So this is the most important thing, is to collaborate with other people within the bank, across the bank. Yeah. So,
okay, so collaborate with other people, which leads quite nicely to my next question. Gentlemen, can I ask you to be quite tight in the way that you answer this, because we have a lot of stuff to get through as well. And I'm conscious of the fact that time is always the enemy in this. But look, are there any particular organizations that banks can learn from when it comes to agility and digital transformation? Radek, you've touched on that, but Alexei, from your perspective, where should banks be looking?
I think it's worth looking at the new entrants, the fintech companies, the startups. I mean, they're basically doing the same business, even though it may not initially look like it. You might say, oh, they're only doing payments, or they're really only doing a narrow segment. But some of the largest fintechs are almost turning into banks already. And what they brought into the industry is a different ethos. And I think the ethos is very different in traditional banks and in tech companies. So they're bringing the ethos of tech companies. And I think that's something that the banks can learn from.
Okay, so look to the fintechs. Martin, do you think that fintechs are the key to the future, or perhaps it's time to look completely outside the financial sector, go somewhere else, perhaps media?
Well, I definitely agree about the fintechs with Alexei, about and the neobanks in particular that we're kind of looking at more closely. But I think outside of financial services, the big tech companies, you know, the GAFAs are increasingly something that we're looking at, and I think it's that you know, using data in a very to personalize experiences, and you know, using data to improve the experience for the customers is one of the key advantages that they're demonstrating. Okay,
so another thumbs up for fintechs. And Travers, where should banks be looking?
So you asked for it briefly. I referenced Netflix earlier. I think they're a good example. I mean, you yourself suggested that maybe media is somewhere to look. You know, a business that started out with physical shipping and distribution of CDs, and is now, you know, globally the premier in streaming. They've completely embraced the cloud technologies and the practices that sit behind it, including and walking up to things like interactive shows now with the Boulder Snatch. So, you know, very, very progressive in use of the technology.
Okay, so let's go to media. And Radek, very, very briefly, you raised the point about banks working outside their traditional orbit. Do you think they should go to fintechs or to the media?
Well, the fintechs has one reason that we should just to focus on, because they focus on a single. In general, they are focusing on the single solution. So they 100% of their effort just to provide the one single solution, and this is good, because this brings to the conclusion that they are effective. Yeah, the question is how they monetize those solutions. Yeah, and this is another question. Yeah, but when we are talking about the media, the Spotify, the Netflix is something that I'm always enjoying, and just there is a kind of the envy on that how they work. So it's good from my perspective.
Okay, it sounds to me like a good draw there. It sounds like a good draw. So 2 for fintechs and 2 for media. In fact, make that 3 for media. I would say that because I'm biased. Okay, as I said, time is very, very tight. So let's now move on with our discussion, because we have talked about what it means to be agile in today's world, and also how banks can successfully marry legacy systems with new technologies. So please do remember, of course, to keep on submitting your questions. You've been most obliging, because that's exactly what you've been doing, using that Q&A function on the the right-hand side of the screen. Okay, so let's dig into the lessons that we've learned from the pandemic and how this in turn has shifted strategies for the very long term. So starting first with you, Alexei, what do you think the pandemic has exposed about the impact of legacy systems on customers? And again, if I could ask you to be brief as well, please.
Yeah, so I think there's one specific thing in the design of legacy systems, is that the end user for whom they were designed is a bank clerk, basically a bank employee. And the systems we need today need to be designed for the customer. So the interaction is between the customer directly with the system. And I think that's a major difference. So we see some systems today where the front end simply passes on information to a bank employee, and they use another system then to make the process go further. But we need to sort of integrate the whole process and make data flow from customer all the way to the back end. And I think that's the key distinction that in these systems.
Okay, thank you for that. And Radek, from your perspective, how successful do you think digital banking products and services have been when it comes to meeting those customer needs? And what do you think the pandemic has revealed about the areas which are ripe for improvement?
I work for the digital bank. Yeah, we were established in 2002, and generally we work fully remotely. But we were not working on the headquarters fully remotely, so it exposed that there is some lessons to do. And the 2 or 3 key tasks were just to service our clients, to keep servicing our clients. Using clients that are using only one tool, yeah, they use only the mobile phone to contact with the bank. So the whole bulk of the processes should be serviced only by the phone, yeah. So the first thing was just to provide, for example, the banking holiday, which in Poland 30% of our clients, credit clients, use the banking holiday, so the loan prolongation payment. And existing portfolio was the key target for the first 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. Later on, we came back to the new portfolio, so for the new sales, and we had to establish the processes that will provide the fully remote, for example, mortgage lending process. Yeah. So now client can apply for almost every loan without going outside the home. During the lockdown, and this will keep with us. The third point was to provide services for our SME clients that they will need to survive. So we decided to launch the campaign and the solutions that traditional shops will go to the e-commerce area. So we are servicing our clients, we are supporting our clients to transform their business into e-commerce. And these were the top 3 initiatives on our side. Yeah.
Okay, so making the bank efficient in terms of how it reaches out to the customers, also the products as well available. Let me move things on a bit. And again, this is a question which I would like to put out to all of you. I'd like to start first with you, Travers, then I want to quickly move my way through the rest of the panel. And this is about banks becoming nimble, because there has been much talk about partnerships as the way for banks to become nimble, faster, and offer more services, etc., to customers. But from where all of you are sitting, do you feel that the pandemic is likely to accelerate that direction?
So in terms of the acceleration of partnerships, I mean, I do. I think we're now marching rapidly towards collaboration in the marketplace, be that fintech vendors, banks collaborating with one another, and so on. So I think it is an important part of that. And in order to genuinely address, the new customers' need, we heard things like, bank holidays and so on. The requirement for the technological renewal to actually service the next generation of products, not just digitize the existing generation of products, is going to require, a collaborative effort again between next generation vendors, the already present SI partners in the banks, and the banks themselves with their own agile agendas. So yes, I think it is fundamentally important if we are to get to where the customers want us to get to, which is truly personalized, customized products that meet their real needs and not the needs of the previously designed generation of products.
Okay, so more partnerships in the pipeline. Do you agree with that, Martin?
Yes, in fact, we have a partnership with Traverse Company. So
the classic example. We got to have the two of you got together. Fantastic.
Yeah, we haven't met, but we talk about Thought Machine a lot. Yes, I think that really it goes back to what Lexi said as well. We built up as a result of lots of different mergers of banks and building societies over the years. So we need to be playing all these games. We need to be looking at the new technology. We need to be rationalizing the existing platforms, and we need to be doing some stuff that's we're doing a lot in the cloud, but helping putting a sort of cloud layer over some of our older legacy technology is often a way to quickly be more responsive without doing all of the heavy lifting at once.
Okay, so you see more of these partnerships happening, and you've revealed a partnership. In fact, we had no idea it was going.
It's in the public domain.
You got it here first. It's called Hot News. And Alexi Krim, do you think that there are going to be more partnerships as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, probably. I think banks are starting to think, what's the smartest way to do something? What's the smartest way to deliver a service to a client? And very often the smartest way is to work in collaboration and in partnership with someone.
Okay, then, and Radek, you were nodding along vigorously, so clearly you're not going to go against that. Very, very briefly, because I want to squeeze in 2 questions before we have to wrap this session.
Well, partnership, yes, but there is one more reason, the cost side, yeah? The partnership is often cheaper, yeah? And that's it.
Okay, then. Well, look, we have had quite a few questions coming through, so let's see how many of these we can whistle our way through. I leave it open to you guys who's going to take it first. But look, we've got one here, again, on the subject of agility. How do you plan for a full budget for a multi-year program if going agile? Who'd like to tackle that one?
Well, I guess I'll start. Like other people might help as well. I think it's tricky because agile tends to look a short period ahead. I think one of the things we found is getting together for planning synchronization sessions every 12 weeks helps a bit better to make sure you're keeping on track with those big enterprise programs that are bigger than one small squad.
Okay, who else would like to address that?
Yeah, you can always benchmark other companies and try to get experience from others, and use events like this to talk to your peers.
Okay, let's stay with the theme of agile. In fact, it seems that these are what most of the questions are about, really, agility. Does agile work also in physical branch-driven banks or only digital online-driven banks? Radek, would you like to try that one?
I would say both. Yeah, from my perspective, it doesn't matter whether it's traditional bank or just a remote bank or digital bank. Fully, it's different, but it's applicable in both sides. Yeah.
Okay, then I think we can have one more question very, very briefly, but I'd like to put this out to all of you again. Would you agree that it is an open and mindful team that makes for a successful agile team? Travers, very briefly, what's your response to that question?
Oh, absolutely. I think everybody always has something to bring. Openness and debate and collaborative working practices make for a much more efficient agile team, no doubt about it.
Okay, Alexi.
Some of the best results I've seen are from diverse teams. It's eye-opening. Just have a diverse team, and miracles will happen.
You can't go wrong. Martin.
I'd say psychological safety, which is also about openness and being mindful. It's very important for teams. Okay,
and final word to Radek.
Well, collaboration, of course, diversity as well. So it's 2 secret words, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, then. Short, sharp and sweet, but delightful nonetheless.